That's okay.
Shout outs and then Elliot.
Yeah, so any shout outs of anyone's online there? I don't know who's on besides Elliot.
Bernie's on.
Ernie, you're on there, and looks like a few more people.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Well,
Elliot, Ernie, us, and who else?
Currently, that's it.
Oh, okay, I just see 4 members, that's why.
Well, there's the council chamber itself and then the computer running it.
Oh, okay, I got you.
It's two overhead.
Two in here, okay, got it. So welcome. Any shout outs? I know if you're here in person, Bill was gracious enough to bring us his latest concoction. It tastes well. But anything else besides this nice warm, finally summer came. So
yeah.
Where did it go? Beautiful.
my garden actually kind of grew in the last 2 days. A little. Second time I planted my garden, so anyway.
Can we put my Bernie's Elliot? Oh. Never mind.
There we go. Elliot's
Oh, there we go. There's Elliot.
So do we have any other kind of shout outs from anybody here?
How's the brewery doing?
Doing good.
Business
coming
wise?
back really well. Not festival, most of it happens up this way, but like the parade, we were slammed.
Good.
Couldn't get in and out of our parking lot, but we were slammed.
You had a lot of walk-in business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, before and after,
See, if this was in Vegas, people would just be walking it down the street.
right. We need to get that changed.
Yeah.
I think that's a state thing. But yeah.
It probably,
We won the mayor's award for our float.
Excellent.
Parade, so-
Nicely done.
Right. Yeah. So it was
Got
good.
pictures of it?
Somewhere. It's on Facebook.
How's biz?
Today was busy. It's kind of up and down. This is usually our slowest month, but this is our last week of our summer camps. We had 5 weeks and they were all sold out.
Wow.
So that's good. And then we just opened 2 day camps in August. We just opened those yesterday. We had 3 people signed up. So I think August, usually we start slowly picking up again. Because people are tired of the heat and the sun, kids are driving crazy, vacations are done, and they're tired of putting sunscreen on.
I was gonna say, all you have to do is like, hey, we have air conditioning.
Yeah, people are coming in right now just to get out of the heat. So,
Yeah.
and we're hopefully get our structure started next
Yeah.
month.
Yeah, structure is out to bid. We got to bid yesterday.
How about you, Kurt?
Doing great. Fishing's been okay. What else do I say? Business wise, I think everything's okay. I went into the office today and everybody's happy, so.
That's the life I want.
Yeah.
I think they're happy.
gonna go with the flow on that one. Huh? Good call.
It's awesome.
Anybody see the record south swell we had in Kona a couple of weeks ago?
Is that the one where I saw a meme of someone having a wedding and this
Yeah,
wave
that
came
was
up and
nothing. Down in Cahoe, just down, like 5 miles from where the wedding was. A wave was so big, it went up and over a 29-foot condo complex. That sits back off the ocean. There's a part of the fairway in front of it. And you can see in the video, the wave it didn't like hit the side and it was just splash that came over. It was the wave.
wow.
Is this on Maui?
No, Kona on the Big Island, yeah. Yeah. it was
What's
very-
causing the wave?
So we had a hurricane that came around the southern point of the island. We had a new moon set and we had a king tide.
Oh, geez. All at the
Perfect
same
combination
time.
for a crazy 2 days of waves.
Huh.
Boy, the surfers must have just been going
It's
nuts.
too big,
Really? Oh, they couldn't even get out there. Oh, man.
too big.
I saw the wedding one and they're getting ready for the wedding and all of just came up over the bank and the wall and looked like everyone was kind of laughing about it because what are you gonna do? But,
Yeah.
yeah,
Jeez.
cool. We have who's on again? Ernie, do you have any shout out?
No, we're chugging along there at AEC. It was nice to see the
See you.
Mountain Festival Parade come back up again. So that was really nice to be able to go up there and join that for a while. So
How about now?
No, we still can't.
We don't hear him yet.
were you hearing me? Are you hearing me okay?
Now we can hear
We
you.
can hear you now.
I was saying that we're doing just fine, chugging along, and really enjoyed being able to get back to the Mountain Festival. That was great.
Yeah, no, it was.
Yeah.
I talked to someone there. We bought a cutting board type thing, and the guy was his first time ever at a Sandy Mountain Festival, kind of new to this whole thing. And in the first half of the first day, he had sold out of about 80% of all his stuff.
Yes.
And he goes, I never hear this would be popular. Like,
Wow.
he goes, so yeah, he was probably sold out beforehand. He was giving
Where was he from?
Malala. Yeah,
Yeah, cool, local guy too.
yeah, local. And anyway,
I can also tell you, just because Chris isn't here, I can't give out the numbers particularly, but I can tell you that Music Fair and Feast may have had their best one ever. Financially speaking. It was
cool.
phenomenal.
People are pent up.
Yeah, there was a lot of pent up demand.
People want to play.
Yeah.
So, and then from the city, maybe we have two things that just bring up was the medical facility up here on
Oh,
the
yeah,
corner.
the Sandy Clinic.
Yeah, we can get an update because it was supposed to be open and it's not yet.
Yeah, no, there's, they have had some issues. The issues are predominantly, the two things that they're waiting on, and I think I put this in the council report or department report a month or two ago, is they're having trouble getting pieces for a couple of, like, for their alarm system and for something else, and it has to do with supply chain issues and chips, basically, and everything else is pretty much done. They're just kind of waiting on those two things. That's the last I heard. That was like maybe a week ago. I haven't been able to chat with Steve Kelly since, because apparently he's been really busy, but he should be around. I mean, I'm actually surprised I haven't heard from him this week. If I don't hear from him tomorrow, I'll reach out to him at the end of the day.
Yeah, we drive by.
They're real close.
See, they're getting closer, but I know
Oh,
they're-
and then the other thing that that you guys might be interested in, we were talking about a little bit before, is covered structure for La Bamba is now complete. And the covered structure for Smoky Hearth will be complete, we're hoping, on Friday. So the next one to be built will be at his place. And after that, there's only two other projects remaining. One is left over from round one, that's the toll gate. The toll gate, the reason that one's taking so long is because it's a unique design. Ron has made a couple of changes, and he's asked for some things that are difficult to do. We've had to run them kind of through not just the building department, but the fire department too. And I think we've got everything worked out now. So the architect should be working on the final design right now. It's not going to be a Sandy style structure because he doesn't have to. He has an exemption to Sandy style, but it'll be really nice looking with an opaque roof. And then the other one that we approved but haven't started yet is at Thai Home. And the reason we haven't started yet is because the applicants asked us to put it on hold because they're dealing with a medical situation right now. They don't know how long that's going to take.
Mhm.
So,
Well, the other big thing you've probably all been seeing is the new 362nd Bell Street.
mhm.
You can see we
They're
come
over
down
there.
26
Yeah.
out there moving stuff.
Mhm.
And we did the golden shovel kickoff here. And I was saying the last time I did what do you call that? The groundbreaking, thank you. The only other groundbreaking I've done in my whole entire time on council of finishing my 16th year and planning was the new high school.
Yeah.
And just
We're in that
half a
picture
block,
together.
yeah. And so, that those two things and how they tie together,
Right.
it was like, I think that's the last time those golden shovels were out.
Yeah.
Honestly, because they've been stored. They're like, yeah, we have these golden shovels. And
Right.
we might have done it at the police station. I can't remember, but I don't think we did. But anyway, that's a big project. And right off the bat, when we did that, they'd only been out there a couple of days and they had down Bell Street, you could see, and it's just going to be such everything about it is a livability, safety, just the traffic to the ease of,
Should take a lot of congestion off of a lot.
That's
just
the big thing.
been one of my top goals while I've been on council and planning, since I've been on, as well as Sandy Net. These two projects are the cornerstones of why I've been on council, but it's gonna be huge. One day it'll go all the way to Kelso and be able to run down there, but then all the economic development that will come from that will now be open to whatever that may look like. So really excited about that.
So north of town, right, whippersnappers.
Right there, all roads lead to whippersnappers. And Fred Meyer's. Anyway, but I noticed though, Canal had all the chain link fence right there on 26th and 362nd. And then yesterday or the day before, they took it all down.
Yeah,
So I was wondering if they got in trouble from ODOT for having it up there.
I don't know.
But anyway,
Joe Johansson actually took some drone shots of that, and the basic grading work, I think, is already done or in the process.
yeah, it looks like it's
Because from the
done.
air, you can see it's very clear where how it's gonna go. I'll
Yeah,
forward this.
and there's a big mountain of dirt you can see
Yeah.
out there. So as they pile that up and already putting in the utilities and the sewer and stuff in there, we have some pictures of that already. So you're supposed to have it all, what do you want, roughed in, I guess it is, by winter here, and then wait for the next spring to get paved and be completed by August. They think they'll have it earlier. They have to have it done before school starts, because I think that's
Yeah.
just a great way to have the
Yeah.
school
Yeah,
open
totally.
up with
Right.
a whole new.
Yeah.
I mean, even from where you guys house your buses,
Yeah.
going straight up and easier to
Yeah.
get to, so. But anyway, that being said, we're pretty excited about that. That's a pretty big accomplishment for the economic group here as well, so. Anyway, that's all I had there, but well, let's what else do we have here? I don't have my glasses. How are labor situations? I know for work, we can't hire anybody, no one's up front.
I have plenty of party hosts and young kids, but I need 18 and older cafe workers there. Have some skills.
Same. What I hear is our skilled and unskilled. Everything's short. We're down, I just saw the labor report, we're down. We have 30 some positions open.
Wow.
Wow, that's
How many total positions do you have when you're filled?
Around 160.
oh wow. Yeah, if you were in city limits, you'd be the largest business
Yeah,
for sure.
Um,
Like not even close.
but we've got with the new labor laws,
Mhm.
with the bully laws, overtime restriction, it hammers us,
Mhm.
so. Through it, don't know how.
Yeah, I know, well, schools are ESD, I mean, I'm just trying to hire for the tech department, no one's applying.
Yeah,
You've heard our special ed, we went for the entire county and stuff. We can't do anything. We have like 20 different companies with that hire temp agencies type thing, find workers for you. We can't find people. I mean, it's a hard career to be in,
Yeah.
special,
It really
but
is.
it like, you can't, people just aren't.
you gotta be careful with those guys too, because they supply you one, then they start picking people off that you got, take them somewhere else. We run into that all the time.
Really,
know
that's, huh,
Once they're in their database, because every employee they get drafted onto a different job, they take a cut of their pay for a year.
Probably, yeah.
yeah.
So, and it used to just be executive level, highly educated, but now we're doing it on the floor level because these people are $20 an hour now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, with unions and pricing going up, and then still, it's just not, they
Yeah.
just can't. And, people are frustrated with us, and it's like, show us where we can hire people.
right. And you know what? Paying more money right now isn't the total answer.
Right.
It just isn't.
I'm hiring 14-year-old kids that have never had a job, that live at home with mom. I pay them $13.75 an hour and 40 hours of vacation or sick time.
Uh-huh.
They have zero experience. It's
Right.
crazy.
And they want
Do they
every
get a
Tuesday or
trophy?
Thursday.
So, no trophies.
A ribbon.
No, no. Kicking the butt.
All right. Any other comments? If there are none, we can go ahead and jump to our presenter. Elliot,
Right on.
you're muted. There you go.
You hear me all right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I've got to confess, I'm a little disappointed nobody sent me the latest concoction here.
Sorry about that.
Well, we could send some to you, but it'd be warm by the time it got there. Elliot.
I've got a fridge. This is a question of logistics. We just need to sort the timing out, and I'm sure we can make it work.
Yeah, well,
Priority mail, we can handle it next time.
okay, yeah, we'll work on that.
That was fun hearing all of that. I went off camera a couple times just managing the home front here, glimpse into my real life. Of course, I'm an hour ahead of y'all, so I've got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we're in the midst of bedtime trying to get them down and make sure that they don't come on screen while we're having this meeting. But happy to be here with you guys nonetheless. Excited that we are getting going on this project in earnest, and I'll give a little project update as part of my presentation. But it was super interesting to hear all the stories about what's going on the ground. And of course, we hope to get on the ground here pretty soon. That will also be part of the update that I intend to give. But
As well, Elliot, that we're putting that road in because it opens up a lot of the commercial land. So
Yeah, indeed.
awesome. Well, maybe we'll get to that. Maybe we won't. Why don't I start sharing, because I don't want to go into some long-winded explanation of something that's going to be on a future slide and then have to redo it when I get to the slide. But I do want to give a little bit of a project update and kind of tell you about where I think we're at and where I think we're going with this project.
sounds good.
All right, can you see that all right?
Well, for us, it's in a different TV. Be able to flip the TVs,
That's okay.
or we can just flip around. There you go. That works.
It's funny because that actually makes it feel, now you're looking at me from my perspective.
I know, right? We have two TVs.
So quick agenda, status update on the project. As I said, some data from the previous discussion. We met a few months ago in May, and I wanted to bring some data back to bear on questions or conversation topics that we had then, and then just some next steps. The status update starts with, like, we're underway. I mean, I anticipated that we would be underway a little bit quicker. I was hoping that we were about to jump in when I met with you all in May, but there are some critical paths that we're managing. So we've got, as you know, the comprehensive plan update underway. We've got the economic opportunities analysis underway. And I think it's a tremendous opportunity that you have, that you're doing all of those at the same time. But we want to make sure that we're avoiding redundancies, being efficient, and some of the data collection happening for the economic opportunities analysis needs to be an input into our thinking about this economic development strategic plan. So we've been collecting some data, but we've also been coordinating with Echo Northwest, your consultant on the economic opportunities analysis, to give them a chance to collect some of the basic data on employment trends and land availability for employment uses, while trying to continue to make progress, if that makes sense. Like, we need to hear from them what they're collecting so that we don't go and collect the same data, but we want to continue the process of getting up to speed on Sandy and getting smart about the community. So that's kind of where we've been over the last couple of months. I think where we're about to go is to plan our engagement efforts for the fall, which, as I mentioned, will get us on the ground in Sandy at least once. We still anticipate completion along a similar timeline to what we originally did. I'm saying winter Q1 2023, pending the world and everything, because you know, who knows, there could be terrible public health news, or we've grown accustomed to the unexpected. Maybe you mentioned the waves in Hawaii. I doubt a tsunami is going to reach Sandy, but you know, it might reach the Portland airport, swell up the Columbia, you know, in theory could. just jokingly, like there is some uncertainty here. We've got to manage deadlines for the other projects and some of those critical path dependencies. We've got to figure out what meetings make sense for bodies like the Planning Commission and your city council. But we're still roughly on the same timeline that we were. And then, David, not to put you on the spot, and I know you're not managing these other projects directly, but I wondered if you could share a little bit about where you're at on the comprehensive plan and the EOA, just given some of these interdependencies.
Boy, I wish I could, but I haven't, I haven't been involved in my first meeting with the EOA. Oh, no, I take that back. I was involved in one quite a while ago. The next one's coming up next week. I don't have any inputs into the comp plan, unfortunately.
Okay, I mean, that's fine. So there are places where we would want to coordinate with the comp plan, and that's maybe on the visioning side. So comp plan updates typically will start with a visioning process. We will want our economic vision, if you will, to build on that more community vision. So that's an interdependency to manage there. And then, as I said, the EOA is mostly about, well, two things: avoiding redundancy in the data collection, so that you're using your contract dollars with us to get data that goes deeper into subjects that you care about, and not just having two consultants being paid to collect data on, say, current employment by sector. But secondarily, both projects require some sort of identification of target industries or sectors. So the EOA does that at a fairly high level in saying, here's the land availability. That land available is suitable for the following uses. And of those uses, these are the ones that have the most potential market support. We want to take it further and say, here are strategies and actions to grow those sectors. And if there are too many to target effectively, then we'll work with you to prioritize amongst them. And so the EOA has to hit that point at which they're ready to have a conversation about target sectors before we can really launch into our visioning and strategy development work. So just wanted to kind of highlight that as one of those things that we're managing and getting this project moving at a good clip. The update on Sandy Speaks, we did put out some project information. David did on Sandy Speaks. We also put out a few activities on Sandy Speaks for folks to start to participate in this process. We've gotten a few comments. In particular, I saw we asked folks like what they'd like to see in Sandy, and specialty food came up, a couple other things, but the comments are just beginning to come in. So as we ramp up our engagement efforts, we'll start pointing people to Sandy Speaks as a resource in the hopes that we can get some traction there. You're hearing from residents at large. Any questions about where we're at right now?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. So the last time we talked, I asked you a few questions and you all went around the room and gave me some really interesting answers. And I wanted to pick a few of those to pull some data and maybe bring that data to bear on this conversation, and then see if we can get a follow-up. So one of the questions I asked was, what is your number one objective for this project? And the highlighted ones are the ones for which I've brought some data tonight. So I can leave this on screen for a moment, but those highlighted ones: who should we be attracting to make Sandy a complete community? And Sandy used to be known as a bedroom community, came here for work, but we didn't shop or dine here. Enjoyed seeing the town grow and change, and growth is going to continue to happen. We want to plan for that growth so that the growth is a good thing, creating a place people can be proud to live or work in. I hope that sounds familiar.
Hey, Elliot.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I just realized that I've been talking with Shelley, and they're planning to do a open house on September 28th at Whippersnappers for the public to look at the comprehensive plan coming up. So I don't know if that.
I think that's one of the community conversations.
Yeah.
That yeah, and then back to what Elliot brought up before. I have been actually involved in two of those conversations now. We had one here, but then there was we also had another one for the Ant Farm Board.
Right.
That was it.
So
So
they're
yeah,
gonna-
that's
So
ongoing.
it's gonna be on the 28th from like 6 to 8:30, and they're gonna have pizza and kids can come and play.
Oh, cool.
So hopefully they'll get a good turnout by having it somewhere different.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so in the agenda, I mentioned the sort of moving forward item, the next steps. One of the things I wanted to talk about is how we can leverage the fact that these three planning processes are going on at the same time, and that may mean having engagement activities at the same time and at the same place. And I think the 28th maybe presents an opportunity to do that. So I'd like to explore that further, and maybe that's a time when we at CAI are on the ground in Sandy to do some of our own work, just getting to know the community, but also to participate in some of those engagement efforts that are supporting other projects. I think that's a great opportunity. So I also asked, what is one economic question you would like us to address with data? And the couple that I pulled out here, again, on the complete community concept, where are we not complete? Is there a hole in a specific sector? Where are we not sufficiently diversified? And then separately, who considers Sandy as an economic hub? You mentioned a few towns near you or the highway towards Mount Hood, but mention the community is larger than the residents within the city limits. So what's the market area that we're serving? And then I asked, if this plan were magic, what one challenge or problem for Sandy would it solve? And the first answer was about how to create an adequate number of living wage jobs, regardless of industry. So I've sort of combined those into three central questions, and that's not to say we won't take a stab at answering the others, but if I go back a slide, like that last bullet, ages, family size, income, all the demographics, that's one of those places where we want to avoid redundancies, because between your comprehensive plan and your EOA, that data is probably already being gathered. And again, you don't need to pay 3 different consultants to gather the same data. So there are a few of these we're working on and we'll bring some better answers to in the future. But for now, tonight's conversation, I honed in on these ones that are highlighted. The first one, is Sandy a complete community? So this data shows employment by sector, by percentage for Sandy, for Clackamas County, and for the Portland Metro. And on the right, we've got some sectors that are underrepresented in Sandy compared to those larger geographies, and overrepresented in Sandy compared to those larger geographies. And I should stress that underrepresented and overrepresented are not bad and good, right? This is about balance. And it is true in all regions that there will be a different sectoral balance amongst communities in any given region. So for instance, the office market in downtown Portland is always going to be stronger and represented more strongly in the data than it is in Sandy. And it is almost always going to be the case that towns that have major infrastructure and on the way to a destination, which is Mount Hood, may have a higher concentration of retail and services. And we see that borne out in the data. But I think we need to ground ourselves in this data nonetheless to see what the magnitude of difference is. Those underrepresented sectors compared to both Clackamas County and the Portland Metro are in services, which is a fairly broad category, manufacturing, construction and resources, WTTU, that's wholesale trade, transportation, and utilities. So largely, if you're thinking in terms of land use, a light industrial category. And fire, which is finance, insurance, and real estate. So more of the white collar office using sectors. Overrepresented compared to the Metro and to Clackamas County are retail and government and education. And again, I've looked at this data for any number of communities throughout the Pacific Northwest, and this is a unsurprising finding. Many communities similar to Sandy would find that they are overrepresented in terms of retail and government and education, and underrepresented in some of the other areas. So what that leads me to ask are a few follow-up questions for you. And I'd like, as we did last time, to maybe go around the room a little bit and just get some of your perspectives or thoughts on this. But which of those underrepresented sectors, which I went ahead and copied at right so that we can keep them in front of us as we talk about it, get you most excited And you can talk about why. It could be, you know, you perceive market support, or you just think it fills a gap in the community, or you know people with skills that contribute to those industries. What are some assets that Sandy has that would be attractive to each of these? I mean, the obvious one, I think, Sandy Net, maybe for folks that are in offices, that fire sector, or potentially the services sector. We've talked about tech before. That would clearly be an asset. What are some of the others that maybe aren't on our radar yet? And then what are some challenges or headwinds that each of these sectors might face? So you all know what Sandy has available better than I. It could be land availability. It could be, again, a question of talent. Maybe just aren't, you know, skilled workers to support these specific industries, but which of these would be most challenged in Sandy? And I'm not going to manage how we go around the room. I'm going to leave that to you all, but if anyone wants to start with any of those three questions, I'd welcome it.
What's the difference between the services and the retail?
Services and retail. So retail is based on NAICS 44 and 45, which is purely in-person retail sales. It doesn't include anything online. Essentially, you have to have a storefront. Services include hospitality. It includes, oh boy, any of the other services that you can imagine that are not captured in fire, essentially. So if you think about like a hairdresser, a salon, or boy, not an accountant, because that would be captured under fire. I'm trying to come up with sort of real world examples, but services is a quite broad category. Anybody working in an administrative capacity typically is captured under services. I can keep trying to come up with some additional examples, but that's the gist of it. It is traditionally, I would say, or typically, the largest sector by percent share for most cities.
What was MTTU again? Oh, I'm sorry, WTTU?
WTTU is wholesale trade, transportation, and utilities. And you typically don't see as much of that away from major transportation infrastructure. So close to the I-5 corridor, for example, or the I-84 corridor, you might see some. As I said, it typically takes the shape of kind of light industrial uses, warehousing, distribution, that sort of thing.
Where would a hospital fit?
Hospital, it depends. It would fit in services, assuming it's not public. So if it's affiliated with a public university or something like that, then it would be in government and education, but otherwise it would be under services.
And what is construction resources?
Yeah, that's sort of a funny one. Resources captures, I think, what you would traditionally think of as resource related employment. So timber and ag, fishing, commercial fishing, that sort of thing. But in many communities, that's fairly small. I guess it captures mining too. But there's a lot of nuance to how those businesses and those jobs are categorized, and some things that you would even traditionally think of as agriculture or mining might actually get captured in manufacturing or WTTU. So it is typically represented as a fairly small sector in most communities. I've done this type of work in Astoria and Warrenton, for example, and it's not a small sector necessarily for them, but I will tell you that as strong as commercial fishing is in Astoria, even to this day, or forestry has been, it still represents much smaller than what they thought it would because of some of those categorization challenges. Construction is heavy contractors mostly. So excavation, construction, I mean, as the name implies, but you know, building contractors, that sort of activity.
Yeah.
It surprises me that it's underrepresented. A lot of
Yeah.
Yeah, the safety
big
works
and
crowd
small.
bagger is pretty big. I mean, there's a lot of.
Look at the Mountain Bay Parade.
Yeah, that's true.
But are we only looking inside the city limits,
Yes.
or are we
Yeah.
looking outside?
I think that is probably the difference. You're only looking inside city limits, is that correct, Elliot?
That's correct. This data is inside the city limits. We could pull data for the county, and in theory, we could pull data for the county and then net out all of the incorporated cities. But you wouldn't have any way to figure out what the geographic distribution is of those jobs outside the incorporated jurisdictions. So they could be right outside Sandy's borders, or they could be somewhere else in Clackamas County, far flung from Sandy.
What if you went by zip code, like just the Sandy zip code?
Yep, we could look at zip codes. In fact, I've got some zip code data coming up, not by employment, but we will see the impact that pulling data by zip code versus by city has. So I guess a bit of foreshadowing, but it is possible to pull the jobs by zip code.
I would bet a lot of our loggers, logging companies, all that are probably outside the city limits, which is why it looks.
Very similar for Estacada and.
Well, I can offer you, I'll get the party started here. Of the underrepresented sectors up there, the one that gets me the most excited by far is manufacturing. And I would say specifically smaller manufacturers, less than 20 employers, artisan type manufacturers. I've been reading up a lot about that as of lately, and I'm kind of coming, I used to be a Main Street manager, so I'm kind of looking at this from the perspective of downtown Sandy more than anything else. But I would love to see more. How is it with the book I just read? Hot sauce handbags and hardware. Things that can be constructed on site are the things that get me excited the most. But basically any type of light manufacturing is something that I would like to see more of here, because that creates living wage jobs. Some of the challenges I think that sector might face is that we simply don't have a lot of industrial land right now. Or if we're going to, I would like to kind of explore maybe, if there are those artisan, really small manufacturers, I'd like to explore maybe looking at putting some of them downtown. And we're not really set up for that right now, but we could be in the future.
There are a lot of companies, David, that are exploring the sort of make in back, sell in front concept that I think does fit into traditional downtowns, or can if you regulate it properly, right? And just make sure that you're setting your code up so that the spaces are designed appropriately. I do think there's a lot of interest in that sort of craft industrial concept where you are manufacturing the product in the back, but with very few negative impacts to neighboring property owners. There's no noise, no smells, etc., at least not significant. And then you have a retail storefront in the same building that fronts on to the street and allows you to sell those same products that you're making.
And we do have one of those businesses in here right now. That's Bill. Boring Brewing is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. So.
I like the idea of more services, because there's still a lot of things that Sandy doesn't offer that you have to go to Gresham or beyond to get. And to get something that I guess I get a little crossover between services and retail. When you say retail is overrepresented, yeah, we're overrepresented by fast food joints.
Yeah.
But we don't have a lot of quality restaurants would draw people here. If you want to have a better dinner, you usually go to Gresham or something. Or up the mountain. So from a living here point, having some better food options, more services that are more varied than, well, it seems like we get a lot of the same thing when we get it. Assets, I think just our location on the route to the mountain, and challenges right now is employment. You gotta have all these businesses, there's no one to work on.
Also a fair point.
I think I'd probably agree on the services. I think, retail. That's why I asked about the hospital, because I think.
I'd love to see a hospital.
Yeah, I think a lot of us that are aging would love to see a hospital too. Or had a kidney stone and had to go to Gresham. And so some of those type of services that we're still having to go outside our community to go and receive. And the hospital is one that just always comes to my mind. I think, you know, the manufacturing aspect of it, whether it's light or medium manufacturing, hear what David's saying, but even, you know, even in a little larger capacity, you know, like Kurt, you know, that, you know, around your size or in between that, I think there's a huge value for more living wage jobs than even just a smaller, you know, 20 or less. What about the 50 to 100? You know, everything starts growing on each other in that. And I think we have some lands that may be coming available or that could take root there. But it comes back to what Hans was saying, employment. How do we get that? I think we'll come out of that at some point. We have to. And we aren't the only ones. You know, everyone is competing with a smaller pool in the region. So, but you know, and then, you know, we always talk about Sandy Net, and I try not to bring it up because I'm always the guy bringing it up, but some of those advantages for these sectors. Class A office space, you know, I've heard that from other people that, you know, having some nicer office space, we don't have that. If we did, you know, people would locate here. I mean, just like what Kurt said, you know, his business is out here. People would enjoy living out here and being here. And you can have the same thing with class office space, especially right now. I don't know where class office space fits in that. Maybe it is services, but people don't want to be in downtown Portland right now. In fact, there was just this, I just read an article today. I don't know if it came out today or if it was the day before. It was kind of one of those emails that sends you a lot of articles from the Oregonian that was studying Portland. And the city of Portland, they have 3,600 employees or whatever. And there is a huge number, like 66% of them don't want to come back to the office.
Yep.
And they were talking about, and I think a lot of it, they talked about some of the things that have happened since COVID and the riots and a bunch of other things, right? Let alone people want to work remotely. So our fiber helps people work remotely. They're out here, but if we had class office space, they would have no problem going, you know,
Right.
1 mile down the road to Kurt's location or to an office to go get out of the house, because honestly, I can't sit in the house the whole time. That's why I go in. I'm a different personality, but I think a lot of it is they don't want to have to commute.
Yeah.
So bringing that office space out into what has been known as the bedroom communities, you know, here is now turned around and very popular. One of the things in Portland tried to do is to get people to come back down there was you got to support your businesses, because you know, we want to support our business. Well, the flip side of it, build it here and support our businesses in
Right.
town, our restaurants and our things for that. And so we don't need a, you know, 70-story building, nor does anyone want one here in Sandy, but you know, a nicer, larger facility, you know, 2 or 3 story, maybe at most, or whatever.
Well, and I'm just thinking about that right now. Since I've been here, I started at the very beginning of 2011. I can't think of 1 single square foot of brand new Class A office space that's been built. I've seen the prices go up for office space, and Ernie has done very well moving out of his building. I mean, Ernie, I don't know where you are right now as far as leasing out the space in your building, but it seems to me, at least from an outside observer, that you haven't had that much trouble finding people interested in that space.
No, we have not had a lot of challenges finding tenants for our offices. So that's accurate. But I also agree that some additional, you know, Class A type facilities would really be welcomed in the community based on the inquiries that we get. While I'm speaking, let me just briefly touch on some of the things that have already been shared. That I agree with the on the services side, and particularly hospitality and with restaurants. I've mentioned that before. I think that's something that would really bring people into Sandy. And I continue to find myself challenged with finding a really nice spot to go and have a good meal. So, and the other one is the medical. Ever since we moved to Sandy 10 years ago, we had the Adventist clinic that's it. And if you need an MRI or if you need any kind of imaging, you gotta go or drive all the way to Gresham. And I think that kind of building and that kind of a service, which is probably a fault on the fire, will also be very attractive to have in Sandy, because people have to travel much further out to get those types of facilities. So medical, wherever that falls into, as well as the service sector on the hospitality side of things.
I know one medical facility that went in, because I did the ribbon cutting
the-
speech for it, was the dialysis place, and I mean, that's not something that I have to need that service, but I don't know. No, it's not something it's open for a lot of people to go to, but I'm assuming that is always full. And when we put it in, it was nice because they had to go to Gresham to look to the nearest place. So.
Right. Now they don't have to anymore. And to Ernie's point, if we had more kind of specialty medical like that, like MRIs, that's a perfect example. That's also something that MRIs have a lot of data input, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so.
Well,
that-
they take them and then they send them off to people that will inspect them somewhere else in the country.
I see.
So that they can move that data a lot faster because it's huge data.
So, yeah, I agree that, I mean, and Sandy does have, like every other, city, we do have our senior population as well. Yeah, I mean, I think those are some of the types of services and that we're currently missing here in Sandy.
Medical complex.
Yeah, medical
The
complex.
hospital would bring that.
Here's another one. This is one that Kelly O'Neill continuously brings up with me, that he's absolutely right. How can we have no pediatricians in Sandy at all? How can that be? We have so many young families here in Sandy. And if you have kids to take them to the doctor, you have to go to Gresham.
So,
Yeah, or have.
why don't you share? I don't need to share it.
Well, I had heard a rumor that the dialysis clinic did shut down. And I looked it up and it says permanently closed on Google, and I heard it was due to staffing. They
Oh,
couldn't find enough people to.
I haven't seen any cars there for a while.
yeah, that's true. I haven't seen any cards there. for a
Which-
while.
We know that people still need dialysis.
Absolutely.
But it's like our own DMV.
Mhm.
They closed it right down before my niece went in there, like 2 days, and then they closed it down because of staffing.
Mhm.
3 different DMVs closed down, and Sandy was one of them.
They can open it back up.
And then they moved the staff members to other locations, so that they could keep them
Interesting.
open. That was in the paper,
Oh, the DMV?
the DMV.
Yes, never coming back.
Come on.
I hate to say it.
God.
So anyways,
Yeah.
it just, so we come back to staffing, but I think. you
But
know,
that's a problem that's being experienced everywhere.
everywhere.
They closed 8 of them, I think, 5 or 8,
Oh, how did I miss that story? Jeez.
because they were understaffed and overcrowded.
They,
Well,
well,
yeah.
they couldn't hire.
Well, because they're not enforcing get back to work.
Yeah,
That's it.
well, my wife's in HR. I know all the employee problems oh too well.
Where would retirement, assisted living retirement? Because I've heard that is it's bringing outside money, basically retirement money. It's not being
Mhm.
serviced there, so your bank account's coming in. You're kind of like a tourist in some ways.
It's bringing
interesting.
outside money into.
But it's also, employs people.
Mhm.
And we have a baby boomer aging population that needs it. And so what I've heard is that you can't even get into the places in Sandy. People are looking all over the metro region that need help with their now aging parents or
Well, we've got the one that's.
with 2 of them.
Two out
Yeah,
there
2,
right
yeah.
now, right? Or they're. well, called,
Well, there's down here Cascadia Village and
the
there.
old hospice building.
Oh, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
Veteran clinic, that's something.
Is that what it is? Yeah, well,
Long term for.
yeah, yeah, so there, and that'll be probably a fair number of retired folks too, so.
Yeah.
So that'll be another facility that'll be, I don't think, yeah, they're not open yet, but when they do, open, that'll be a little bit more. But yeah, that's another. I guess that would fall, Elliot, would that fall under services?
Yeah, most of the healthcare stuff, including the assisted living and senior facilities, would fall under services.
Okay.
Can I ask a couple quick follow-up questions? Just, I mean, this is stuff that I can go and learn independently, and I will research it, but you all probably already know a lot of this. Who are the biggest hospital chains in the metro area? I mean, Kaiser, is it Swedish, is it Providence, is it somebody else?
Providence, Kaiser, and Legacy.
And
Advanced.
And Adventist, yeah.
Yeah, those are them.
Providence, and Legacy, and Kaiser are probably the biggest, and then Adventist.
There's just been a big push in healthcare, but with some hospital chains more than others, to move to a more distributed clinic model. And I think that sounds like something that could be a good fit. But, you know, if we're going to talk about recruitment efforts, if we're going to talk about, you know, communicating out to these hospital chains about what Sandy's needs are and where we perceive there to be a market opportunity, we'd want to make sure that we're matching their growth ambitions in terms of the growth model that they're embracing right now. So that's why I asked that. And then the other question that I wanted to ask is, a lot of times workforce development for healthcare positions actually doesn't start at the bachelor's level, it starts at the associate's level. And so we're not talking about OSU and U of O. Who in the metro area do we know of that are producing graduates at the associates level into healthcare professions like CNAs, MAs, et cetera?
Mount Community College.
PCC.
And Linfield's a big one. It's out on the other side.
Clackamas Community College.
Yeah.
PCC. Mount
They
Hood.
all have programs.
Yeah, they all have. My brother-in-law did the nursing one out of Mount Hood. So.
Yeah, I've taken a tour of all the CTE programs out at Mount Hood. And the nursing, the healthcare one has always been one of the more impressive.
And then Sandy High School has
That was just all.
a what do you want to call it, a CTE type program?
CTE programs.
Yeah.
How they're doing.
So our own high school is help kickstarting that off before they end up getting into college.
Yeah, it would be neat if we could work out something with Mount Hood Community College to maybe offer some classes in some of those CT programs out here, out here in Sandy. That would be well.
I would like to share a brief observation regarding hospital. One of the trends that I have noticed with OHSU is that they have been embedding themselves at other hospital facilities, at Adventist, for example, also out at Mount Hood Legacy near the college. So those are the OHSU may be a resource for expanding coverage out there in the Sandy area, because they have certainly been very proactive about working with some of the other existing hospitals and clinics.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ernie. Thank you. It's true.
Fantastic. This has been great. I'm going to go ahead and move us on to the next question, but very helpful. Thank you, everyone. Next question I had highlighted is, what is Sandy's market area? And the data that I have here is not going to give you a perfect answer, but I do think it's going to be interesting nonetheless. So some of this data, we can sort of look at a high level and just say, you know, where are people coming in from for work, and where are residents who have jobs going out to? And I think this graph is illuminating, but then I have some maps that break it down both by jurisdiction and by zip code. And I think those are super interesting. So at the high level here, with the graph by jurisdiction, where Sandy workers live, I mean, the number one location is Sandy. So of all people who work in Sandy, 20% of them also live in Sandy, followed by Gresham, followed by Portland. And then after that, it's pretty distributed. So there's no additional city with more than 2%. But in terms of outflow, so for people who live in Sandy and work, so it's Sandy resident workers, where do they go for their jobs? You know, the largest by far is to Portland at 27%, followed by staying in Sandy at 13%. And just behind that is going to Gresham at 11%. So this Sandy, Portland, Gresham nexus, if you will, I get that Portland's not exactly next door, but those three by far account for both the largest share of destinations for resident workers and the largest source of commuters coming in to work at Sandy jobs. The inflow, if you look at the other category at 56%, is more significant than for the outflow. So more Sandy residents work in, the language that they use to summarize this data is tricky. More Sandy residents work in those three places than Sandy workers commute from those three places. In other words, the people commuting in are more distributed than the destinations to which Sandy residents commute. Now, if that's clear as mud, then maybe the maps will help. So I'll keep moving. This is where do workers in Sandy live? So people commuting in. The percentages that you'll see are slightly different just because on a technical note, I filtered the jobs data differently. This data source allows you to filter for all jobs, primary private sector jobs, and it creates subtle differences in the data. In this case, I'm filtering for all primary private jobs. So it's private sector employers, and it's only for the job from which any given individual derives the majority of their income. But nonetheless, Sandy workers in Sandy live for the most part in Sandy at 18%, or at least that's the leading location. After that, Gresham at 11%, Portland at 8%, Mount Hood Village at almost 4%, Troutdale just over 2%, and after that, we're into relatively small shares. You know, the original comment that spurred this line of thinking mentioned places like Estacada, that's at 1.2%. What's that, 7th or 8th on the list, something like that?
I'd be curious about a 4-mile radius. And the reason why I say that is, I mean, I grew up 4 miles down the road outside the city limits and 3 miles down the road outside. And we have a huge population that just lives right outside the city limits, but I guess we'd all be considered Clackamas County, but you know, they work in, you know, that's another pool just because they live on the other side of the line. I guess from that chart, we're counting it as other locations.
Yeah, does this just look at incorporated cities? I don't see Boring anywhere there. That's a big land mass. A lot of people live there. I would think that they would have registered somewhere on this list.
So two things. I'll try to answer both questions or comments. One, again, I'm going to summarize this data on the next slide by zip code, which will not perfectly conform to any given city, but will capture folks in unincorporated areas. And two, one of the limitations in this data is that unfortunately you can't draw like a custom geography. So they give you the choice of doing by county, by what they call place, which in terms of Census Bureau terminology is largely an incorporated city, or there's also this category called a census designated place. So Mount Hood Village is not an incorporated city, but it is a census designated place. So the data can be summarized in a way that represents Mount Hood Village. But because we can't do any custom geographies, we are not able to say, draw the 4-mile radius and capture it that way. It is possible that we could come up with, depending on the way the zip code boundaries are drawn, maybe a collection of zip codes, or the census tract boundaries are drawn, a collection of census tracts that would approximate the 4-mile radius. But again, we'd have to look at how those boundaries are drawn.
Okay.
So next slide, same data, but summarized by zip code, and it looks very different, right? This is exactly the same data, but Portland doesn't represent on the map at all, for example, because when you summarize Portland as an entire jurisdiction, it is a significant portion of where Sandy workers live. But when you summarize it by zip code, no individual zip code in Portland represents as strongly as some of the other zip codes extremely near to Sandy. So this shows a much tighter network where folks who are working in Sandy are disproportionately coming to Sandy from places nearby, including within Sandy and the unincorporated areas right around Sandy.
Yeah, that tracks a lot better.
So then the flip side, not workers in Sandy, but Sandy residents. So where are people commuting out to for work? Again, Portland by jurisdiction or by city represents quite strongly, 27.5%. And given what we talked about with the balance of sectors, I'm sure that's not surprising, right? People who work in some of those heavily office using sectors might naturally be commuting to the city that has the highest concentration of office using employment in the region. But of course, Gresham comes through strongly as well at 12%, almost 11% for folks who are staying in Sandy to work. And again, that data is just slightly different than the graph that I showed you, but same data, sliced a little bit differently. Beaverton, Vanguard, Borough, Salem, and again, we're getting further and further into small shares of total Sandy resident employees.
Can I ask a question on that? So is that where the business they work for lives? And the reason I ask is because that might be changing if people are working remotely now. Like, is that where I work for the US Bank, my address is the US Bank Tower in downtown Portland, but now I'm able to work from home 100% or 90%. Is that work still Portland or is that work now their house?
It's an excellent question, excellent point, and work is still Portland. However, this data, unfortunately, as useful as this data set is, it is not updated as frequently as we would love it to be. So this is 2019 data, and that's the latest year for which it's available, which means it does not reflect post-pandemic trends. Even if it did, again, it's the address of your employer, so it wouldn't fully capture the extent to which people have started working from home. And that's something that we can rely on other data sources to help to articulate, although there is no perfect data source on this point, and it's such a recent phenomenon that most of the data sets don't reflect it. But you do see in this data here, I pulled the top 25 locations, which is why in all of these tables, there's an all other locations line, because people work in more than 25 places across Sandy, but that 25th location is Bend. And the 15 people as of 2019 working in Bend, I don't think are commuting in and day out to Bend. It's possible that a couple are, but most of them are probably working for companies based in Bend and they were working remotely.
Yeah, but I know people that moved to Bend are working here, but now they can work remotely or 1 or 2 days a week. Yeah.
So does this chart represent the resorts on Mount Hood, like Timberline, Ski Bowl, and Meadows? Because it would seem like there'd be more than 59 people that would work at the ski resorts up there.
Yeah, that's another challenge with the way we summarize the data. So because Timberline's not in an incorporated municipality, when we summarize it by place or by city, it will probably not register. Now, again, the next slide I've got is by zip code, and all of a sudden you see some stuff up, by Mount Hood that might be capturing some of that. By zip code, you see a different pattern where, again, Portland doesn't register as strongly, but you do see portions of Portland, zip codes within Portland where people are working, particularly in the east and southeast parts of the city. But the network is drawn much more tightly. It's more geographically conformed to Sandy and its immediate neighbors. So I'm not suggesting that this gives us an exhaustive an exhaustive definition of what is Sandy's market area. And there are a few other data sources that I would like to pull in over the course of this project. We can look at retail sales relative to potential demand or potential consumer spending. That helps to understand across the various types of retail where leakage is occurring and where Sandy potentially could attract additional consumer spending. But this is a broader view. Again, it's all jobs across all sectors. And so it has some implications for, travel corridors, business relationships, things of that nature that I think are important. And I just wanted to bring this data to our attention and then ask what the strategic importance is of these connections. And we've already hinted on this a bit. Who are these data not capturing that need to be reflected in the strategy? And it is maybe the folks that are living in Sandy and working up on the mountain or something like that, the folks that are within that 4-mile radius, but not in the data when summarized by place. It's also, the people that are passing through Sandy and how we capture those. So I wanted to throw those couple questions out for discussion.
I think just because of my background at the resorts, between Meadows and Timberline and Siebel, just those three, not even counting Mount Hood Resort, peak season, that's like 1,500 employees at least. And they're coming from, now some might go be in Hood River and a lot up, but I think as the mountain prices itself out of the working class, they are moving more and more towards Sandy to work up there. And with Sandy now, with the bus transportation going up there, it makes it easy for employees to get up there. But it's a pretty significant chunk of workers.
Yeah, and then I just wonder more about the telecommuters and how many more of them there are now, and how much of a draw SandyNet might be to people who are looking to telecommute either currently or maybe in the near future. And I wonder, how much that factors into home buying decisions and things of that nature.
Well, Greg was just showing me here the CEO of Adventist. CEO of Adventist has a house here in Sandy.
That's interesting. Yeah.
A vacation home or whatever, a second house or whatever it may be, but here in Sandy as well. So, how much of that industry could be looking at MRIs.
Yeah, well, just, that brings back into my head how much of an asset SandyNet really is, because how important that is, how much more important is that now in our culture than it was 3 years ago? I mean, orders of magnitude more.
Yeah.
And if we have, the fact that we have, in many cases, better connectivity and bandwidth in many places in Portland, it seems to me like we should be telling people about that, right?
I'd be happy to get a little billboard that says, come work from home here.
Yeah, I love that
I
idea.
said we need houses.
And I think that word needs to get out better just by seeing some Facebook. I see people ask, I moved to Sandy, what's the best internet? And
They shouldn't have
everyone-
to ask that
They
question.
shouldn't have to ask that. It should be straight SandyNet, but people are all over the place still.
Well,
It's like,
that's a marketing thing. So like part of marketing is
Right.
gaining new audiences, but also letting people know that
Right.
don't know about you. Like, people that have been here for 20 years.
yeah, you gotta count yourself a little
And
bit more.
Marketing is something we're pushing into, but it's one of those things where if you cause that demand, you have no way to meet it, then you end up.
I
just-
should
it's-
answer.
Yeah, so it's a balance, right?
That's
So,
That's
yeah.
a good point.
We have an online presence, like just saying, like, we have an online presence that we tailor to try to attract new audience without trying to create an overwhelming, hey, I live up in Welch's, I live up here and there and stuff, so.
Yeah, because that zip code goes outside the city limits.
Yeah.
So, but what type of market area, I guess, is that meaning like, when we talk about that, our market area is much broader when it comes to some of that workforce, right?
Yeah, because, there's, Sandy is the closest place to go for a lot of goods and services and retail. For some of these communities, Estacada, for example, we kind of count that as being part of our market area, not necessarily because people can't shop in Estacada, they can, there's a thriftway and bank down there. But anything beyond the basics, there's a lot of businesses that Sandy has at Estacada doesn't. And people will come make that short trip up here to get those things.
I mean, just roughly, to paint the corners, it's government camp to East Gresham to
Yeah.
Estacada to, Corbett.
Yeah.
I mean, just to paint the corners, that's it. It's a pretty big area, but
Yeah.
it draws from all that.
Yeah.
Even down to Troutdale.
Mhm.
We draw, I mean, our biggest numbers are probably from Gresham, Troutdale, and Happy Valley. Outside of Sandy.
Yeah. Well, you draw from actually quite a,
Further than that, but
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
but that's
really
just due to
big.
the
Gresham,
lack of businesses. like
Happy
yourself.
Valley, Troutdale is huge draw.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Happy Valley.
Yeah, our market area is that size, but then sometimes beyond that because of our
But
the
they
digital world make everything smaller, but that answer what you're looking for, Elliot?
Oh, it's all, I mean, all of it honestly is helpful. I'm ultimately trying to provide you answers, but I think our conversations help point me in the right direction as to what data to collect and how to report back on it. So hopefully we're moving these conversations forward incrementally. And as we move through these next phases of the project, I can use what you're telling me to sort of refine our search and bring back stuff that's more useful. Last question that I wanted to sort of elevate tonight: how do we create an adequate number of living wage jobs regardless of industry? So there's no, well, I won't say there aren't any definitions, there are, but there's no universally accepted definition of a living wage job. And that's a conversation I want to have with you. What's a living wage job in Sandy? But to inform that conversation, I brought some data on household income and wages. Median wage by industry across all industries in Sandy is about $59,000. Healthcare is the sector that pays the highest wages, and it's the only sector in Sandy that pays above the median at about $68,000. The service occupations pay the lowest wages across all of the various types of jobs that fall into services, and some within that category will pay higher than the 29,000 roughly that is shown here. So I don't want to suggest that service jobs should be off the table on the basis of wages, but this is the sectoral distribution of median wages nonetheless. Housing,
Can you go back? We're having a hard time reading it, so we gotta get closer.
That's old guys.
And median is what? Is it 60,000?
Yeah.
50, yep, so 59,200 across all sectors
Insane.
in Sandy. Bear in mind that that may be different than the median household income, right? Because the median household income is going to take into account households that have 2 earners. So this would just be for individual occupations.
You might be showing us next, but where does that compare to other areas?
Other cities.
Yeah.
Well, a mea culpa, I will bring that data next time. I am not showing that next, but I did want to look at, I think the wage data is interesting, but I think it's hard to draw a bright line to say only a wage of X is going to constitute a livable wage in any given place, because there are many factors at play. A livable wage for a 22-year-old with no spouse and no kids and no student loans might look different than a livable wage for someone that has a spouse and 3 kids and they're all in daycare, and daycare is $1,700 a month for each of the kids or something. I mean, you know, the costs that you face depending on your life situation obviously impact on what you would deem to be a livable wage. Housing costs also have a significant impact on what you would deem to be a livable wage, because housing typically accounts for the largest portion of a household budget. And so I wanted to look at the housing cost burden and median housing prices next as an input into this conversation. So for housing cost burden, actually the numbers, I don't want to say they're not bad, because it's unfortunate that we are in a position where anyone can be cost burdened just to afford a decent home, but they are not as high as we see in some other communities. So for owners in Sandy, 71% are not cost burdened. For renters, 53% are not cost burdened. And in total, 65% of Sandy residents are not cost burdened, with the definition of cost burden being that you spend 30% or less of your gross income on your housing costs, which would include all housing costs, your mortgage or your rent, your insurance, any applicable HOAs, etc.
Utilities.
Yes, I'd want to double check to be sure, but I believe utilities are included in this calculation. I just want to double check on the underlying data to make sure that I'm correct in that. Cost burdened is this middle set of bars. That's folks who spend anywhere from 30 to 50% of their income on housing, and 24% in total fall into that category. And then finally, there's a category called severely cost burdened, which means you're spending more than 50% of your income on housing costs. And that's 10% of all Sandy residents. And in all cases, across all three of these categories, renters are more cost burdened than owners. So it's one other input. And then finally, median home sale price and household income. You can see the median home sale price has gone up quite rapidly in Sandy from 2012 to 2020, based on data from Redfin. It's gone from $180,000 to $368,500. So it's effectively doubled, almost exactly. Wages have gone up. Well, I should not say wages. To be more precise, household income, again, accounting for the fact that some households have multiple earners, has gone up also rather significantly from $55,500 more or less to $81,300. But the median home sale price has increased at a faster rate than household incomes. And I don't have it on the slide here, but I did a little bit of back of the envelope math, if you will, this afternoon as I was thinking about these data. I looked at that 2012 household income and median sale price, and I made some assumptions about financing a home purchase. And I said, you put 20% down, and right now, I mean, interest rates, of course, increasing. I assumed a 5.5% interest rate, and I looked at what your monthly payment would be after that 20% down, and at 5.5%. I looked at what, in theory, you could afford to spend on your monthly mortgage payment based on that income. So that 30% threshold that we spoke to. And the home price from that standpoint was quite affordable in 2012. You would have been able to afford about 1.7 times what the monthly mortgage payment would have been on a $180,000 home using those assumptions. Fast forward to 2020, it's not out of control. You, in theory, can still afford that $368,000 home on an $81,000 household income, but your debt coverage ratio, it's not technically debt coverage ratio, that term means something very specific in the commercial real estate community, but if you'll allow me to use it loosely for the purposes of our conversation, what you could afford to pay for housing at 30% monthly does cover what your mortgage payment would be using those same assumptions, but only at a factor of about 120%. So 170% or 1.7 debt coverage ratio to about 1.2. So the affordability of housing in Sandy has been eroding because household income has not been increasing as rapidly as median home sale price. So I'm sure you have some questions about that data, but all of that we need to ask, and this is kind of the last stuff we've got for tonight, so we can close here, but what does a livable wage mean for Sandy specifically? And what weight should we give industry sector wages in identifying target sectors? In other words, how important of a criterion is the livable wage question when we come to evaluating what we're targeting and where we're putting our resources?
Looking back at your slides, looks like the healthcare industry is the way to go.
Kind of has a double-edged sword
Yeah.
when you look at this, because you want to bring the wages up and bring in jobs that have wages, but then the supply and demand on housing
Right.
goes up as well. You have to really, really pushing up the housing to compensate for. And it's not Sandy, you're looking at a bigger region around, say, the metro region, even way outside, because we've always been known as the more affordable place to live. One, we're in Clackamas County, but two, that even within Clackamas County,
We're out here. on
and
the
then so
edge.
people come out here, so the supply and demand is.
Well, I think some of the influx that we're seeing is people that maybe have a higher wage leaving the city, or
Yeah,
moving out here because maybe telecommuting is more adaptable, so they don't worry about the commute. So, yeah, I think, what does it mean for Sandy? I think wage is very important, right? As this community grows and we have pressures from people in the city moving out here, I don't want to see our longtime residents pushed out like we're seeing it in Rhodey and Welch's. Different dynamic up there. The Airbnb market is just
Yeah, it's
killed.
very
housing
different
up
than that.
there.
But yeah, I kind of look at it the same way. Living wage jobs here in Sandy increases the possibility that people will both live and work in Sandy.
Yeah.
And that ends up, benefiting the community the most.
And that probably takes you back to the healthcare and manufacturing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Services, restaurants and stuff. I don't think you can put some great restaurants in Sandy and all of a sudden we're gonna boom.
Right.
I think that's gonna be cause and effect.
Right.
Over time.
Yeah, the service, and I firmly believe that the service and retail will follow.
Yeah.
If we make improvements in, or if we grow our business community the correct way, we'll get the wet linen tablecloth restaurants. And we'll get the services that we don't currently have here, but would really like, because the market will demand.
so those services are the hospital, medical fields.
Oh, yeah.
The services are the Class A office space.
Right.
So.
But you're gonna have to look for higher end jobs and incomes to make that all work. If everybody's,
Right.
Like I say, if all of a sudden we had a bunch of restaurants and everybody's waiting tables and everything, they're not that livable wage job unless, they're really hustling.
Right.
I think it's very important for Sandy for livable wage. And a livable wage means you be able to purchase a house,
Right.
not rent.
I apologize, I don't know if Elliot spoke to it here, but it showed that the service side was the lowest paying on the wages, but yet that's the highest sector in.
We're overrepresented. So it's true, so.
No.
And it still says under, but it's like 40.
Oh, well, yeah, I was thinking retail.
The service has so many things under it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of categories under service.
Right.
I just didn't know if that meant the housing, because there's two people working underneath the household, that offsets that to make it, so it's still numbers skew to work, because if you've got someone in service, you probably have someone, either another person in service or something else, or how that was represented, but I just saw that, and I was like, well, those are complete opposites, it seemed like. But
We can continue the project of demystifying this data. I mean, one of the challenges is that different sources of data will categorize industries and industry sectors and occupations within those industry sectors differently. And so sometimes the data require what we call a crosswalk, which is an analysis to sort of match up one to the other. We can do that if that's necessary, of course, but I think this has been really interesting to listen to. The idea about a livable wage, being able to afford to purchase a house. I mean, fortunately, your median household income, in theory, still can purchase a house, but the directionality of those trend lines on that graph is not encouraging, and it's not unique to Sandy either. I mean, Portland, like Seattle, like Boise, like any number of places where we work, is experiencing a real housing crunch, maybe a housing crisis in some ways. And there is a redistribution going on. And so I think, you know, this isn't a housing strategy, but to the extent that we want to make sure that Sandy doesn't follow, you know, one of those paths into a real housing crisis, we just need to be proactive about it. Part of that is your housing policy, and part of it's economically, what do we choose to go after, and how do we anticipate the effects that that will have on the housing market.
And your data is from 2019, correct?
For which exhibit? So this data goes through 2020.
Oh, that one.
So it is entirely possible that housing prices have continued to escalate. I don't know where household incomes have gone since then. Fortunately, the household income data would reflect workers who are working remotely, just because that's the way it's tracked in this data set. It's by place of residence. So it's what people who live in Sandy report their income as being, regardless of where their job is. But yeah, this is the latest data that we have at this point in time. I suppose we've got more recent data for median home price, because Redfin updates more or less continuously. We can get data for probably Q1 2022 even, but we would not have the comparison from the Census Bureau to show the wage or the household income data, rather.
When you, I'm sure you looked at other data, was there in 2008, was there a dip in the median home sale price? You know?
I bet we can find out, or we can at least chip away at it. This Redfin data specifically only goes back to 2012, but there are other sources of similar data. In fact, the Census Bureau itself tracks median home value, which is different than median home price. We prefer the median home sale price data from private companies like Redfin or Zillow, because it tracks a little closer to where we think the market bearing price for a home is in any given location. But if you just wanted to see the directionality year to year, then the Census Bureau data would show us that. It would show us if they saw home values dipping in 2008, 2009. So there are other ways to get at that question.
Just because we might see something not quite as dramatic as that, but something similar happening here in the next year or two, maybe. I don't think it'll be as bad as that, but.
Well, something's got to go. Out of my rental house, it's going to be worth $1 million very soon.
Right. Was that the last question, or?
This has been really interesting to me. I had a next step slide or a moving forward slide, but I implied a lot of this when I talked about the project status earlier, just outlining and completing the landscape assessment task. That's where we're collecting more data, and we're looking at other plans and policies to kind of get smart. And we're doing that in tandem with Echo Northwest. Scheduling and preparing for the visioning and the goals and strategies studio. So those offer an opportunity for us to get on the ground in Sandy, and maybe that September 28th date is one that makes sense. That's something David and I can talk about offline. And then just ongoing engagement through Sandy Speaks, and kind of making sure that we're doing what we can to drive engagement with the content that's on that website, and make sure that we're getting some public feedback. So that's where we're at. And that was my last slide for the night.
And on that Sandy Speaks stuff, guys, it's there's a link to it on the landing page for the homepage for the city. So if you click on Sandy Speaks, it'll take you to the projects, and click on the economic or development strategic plan one. Just kind of poke around in there. Some interesting stuff in it.
Well, thank you, Elliot. It was very informative, and nice to see it moving forward.
Yeah, we're excited to be, as I said, getting going in earnest. And maybe I'll get a chance to get out there and meet you all in person. I hope so.
Yeah, great. Looking forward to that.
We'll keep that conversation going.
Bill, bring more of this.
Yeah, more beer. We'll make sure you're taken care of when you get out.
You can see where he manufactures it.
Yeah, I'll show you light manufacturing in Sandy.
I would love it. I may have to tap into some lightly manufactured products here in about 10 minutes.
Fair enough.
Out of the way.
All right.
All right. Thanks a lot, Elliot. And I'm sure you and I will be talking very soon.
That sounds great. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
You as well.
All right, any other comments for the meeting?
Nope. Good
Nothing
beer.
else? Let's adjourn. Thank you.
Good beer.
Thank you for the